Well, I think by the 1811, Tecumseh can see that war is imminent between the Americans and the British. And I think he hopes to use this war to help defend Native American homelands in the Old Northwest. The problem for Tecumseh is always going to be one of logistics. It's one of bringing in large numbers of warriors and supplying them and feeding them and providing with adequate arms and ammunition.
My sense of Tecumseh is that he was keenly aware of moments of opportunity, moments to strike, moments to act. And 1811 was not one of those moments.
The dog days of summer, 1811, were just reaching their peak when Tecumseh embarked on one last grueling tour, heading south this time to what the Shawnees called the Midday, determined to bring the Chickasaws, Choctaws, and Creeks into the Confederacy and to shore up British support for the movement. Before leaving Prophetstown, Tecumseh urged his younger brother to do everything he could to keep from being drawn into a fight with Harrison prematurely, then made one last stop at Vincennes to see Harrison himself before continuing south, hoping to convince him not to initiate hostilities.
Well, I think it was crucial to hold off for several reasons. The first is that Tecumseh was the only person equipped to lead. The second being that British support was crucial, and whatever they did, it had to be coordinated with the British. And third, I think Tecumseh was really confident that his southeastern tour would result in a great many adherents.
August 6th, 1811. The day before he set out, he paid me a visit and labored hard to convince me that he had no other intention by his journey to the south than to prevail on all the tribes to unite in the bonds of peace. August 7th. He is now upon the last round to put a finishing stroke to his work. I hope, however, before his return, that part of the fabric which he considered complete will be demolished, and even its foundations rooted up.
In late August, writing that Tecumseh's great talents alone were holding together the heterogeneous mass of warriors on the Wabash, Harrison received permission to march on Prophetstown. And 1 month later, on September 26, 1811, at the head of a force of nearly 1,000 men, headed north towards the Indian stronghold, 180 miles away. As reports came into Prophetstown of Harrison's approaching army, hundreds of warriors converged on the Indian village to defend it.
As Tenskwatawa watches the American army advance, he is faced with the question of what to do. You sit and wait to see if the American intentions are peaceful, or should you strike against it? When Tenskwatawa hears of the American army advancing, he interprets this as an act of aggression.
Around 2 o'clock on the afternoon of November 6th, Harrison's 1,000-man force clambered up a steep ravine on the eastern side of a narrow stream called Burnett's Creek and went into camp on a narrow bench of high ground planted with high oak trees. 1 mile to the east lay Prophetstown, stretching south along the Wabash from the mouth of the Tippecanoe. As the light began to fail, 2 officers and an interpreter rode out under a white flag to convey Harrison's orders that the Indian camp disperse.
Tippecanoe, there's a crucial moment on November 6th when Harrison arrives. He arrives with more than 1,000 men, and Harrison and Tenskwatawa agree to meet the next day to discuss how they might reach some kind of compromise. But on the night of November 6th, Tenskwatawa is besieged by his Western Algonquian allies, and they tell him, look, we have to fight. We have to surprise them. They think we're going to have a discussion, but let's wage a preemptive strike. To come all that way and to do nothing but wait for Tecumseh made little sense to them.
We say get the heckle.
And so Tenskwatawa goes against his brother's wishes for him. You know, he caves to pressure. And not only that, but he tells his allies that they'll be safe from American bullets, that his power as a medicine man is such that no one will be harmed.
Sometime in the night, a long column of warriors began to file silently out of the village, heading in a long arc for the northwest corner of the American encampment.
It was a very wet morning. Sentries are posted and everything, and possibly Winnebago warriors, but certainly warriors, tried to penetrate the camp, crawling in to the camp, and they even make it past the sentries.
Around 4 a.m, a picket stationed a few yards out beyond the left flank of the camp thought he saw something moving in the trees. Whipping his musket to his shoulder, he fired blindly into the gloom, mortally wounding a Kickapoo warrior as he attempted to steal into the camp. Harrison himself was in his tent when the first shot rang out, followed by a series of blood-curdling war cries and a tremendous crash of muskets as the war party rushed in. The Battle of Tippecanoe had begun.
It was a classic Indian attack. If you don't have the numbers on your side, you make a sudden attack and try to overwhelm and demoralize the enemy quickly. And it was carried through at Tippecanoe with great determination, considering how few warriors there were, and they didn't have much ammunition. The Indians were a very mobile force. They were almost like water. They gave way to things and they strengthened around weak points in a very flexible way. They didn't have to wait for orders from chiefs. They fought very much individually. So if they perceived a force getting out of its depth, moving forward and getting split up from the main force, they could easily rally round and start surrounding it and cutting it to pieces. I mean, if there had been more Indians on the ground, the Indians might have been capable of inflicting great damage.
The Indian warriors attack Harrison's army in camp at dawn. For a moment it looks as if the Indians have infiltrated the lines, there's confusion, but as the light increases, it becomes clear to the Americans that the Indians lack the numbers, that they lack the ammunition to carry this assault home. And eventually, the Indians are driven from the field. In reality, the Americans suffered probably more casualties than the Indians. The American force was superior, the American force was better armed, the American force had more ammunition. But I do think that it represents a blow to the Confederacy.
On the night of November 8th, 2 days after the battle, Harrison's soldiers edged warily into Prophetstown for the first time, only to find that the Confederated forces had dispersed into the surrounding countryside. Ordering his men to plunder the village, setting fire to the lodges and destroying all the Indians' food supplies, Harrison headed back down the Wabash towards Vincennes, declaring in dispatches his mission had been accomplished.